The morning sun had just begun stretching its golden arms across the horizon when a battered blue sedan rolled to a trembling stop on the side of a quiet country road. Inside, Zephyr tightened his grip on the steering wheel, exhausted, hungry, and late for the second job he desperately needed. His 8-year-old daughter, Mira, sat in the back seat humming softly, unaware that their lives were hanging by threads so thin he feared they would snap any day. Life had already taken too much from him. His wife, his savings, and his dreams, yet here he was again, breathing through the heaviness and praying tomorrow would somehow be kinder. But fate had a strange way of showing up. Up ahead, Zephyr spotted a sleek white SUV angled awkwardly on the roadside, one wheel dipped deep into a ditch. A woman stood beside it, arms wrapped around herself, her beige coat whipping in the morning breeze. And though he had no time, no margin, no space for detours, Zephyr pressed his brakes. Something inside him, maybe the last bit of goodness he still had, wouldn't let him drive past someone in trouble. Before the story unfolds fully, if you believe in kindness, humanity, and the power of second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Touch of Kindness. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. Zephyr stepped out, brushing dust from his faded shirt, and called out gently. The woman turned with startled eyes, deep hazel, glossy with worry, and he noticed how out of place she looked against the dusty countryside. Her clothes were expensive, her posture sharp yet trembling, and her car easily cost 10 times what he earned in a month. She introduced herself as Selene, her voice steady but her hands unable to hide their shake. She explained that she'd swerved to avoid a stray dog and ended up stuck, her phone dead and no traffic along this lonely stretch. Zephyr didn't hesitate. He grabbed his rope from the trunk, a rope he used often because life had. Taught him to tie things together when everything else fell apart, and hooked it between his old sedan and her SUV. It took nearly 20 minutes, his arms burning, sweat tracing down his temples, Mira cheering from the back window, and Selene watching with a mix of awe and guilt. When the SUV finally heaved free, Selene let out a sigh so heavy it seemed to lift the dust around her. She offered him money, a lot of money, too much money. But Zephyr shook his head. He didn't have a lot, but he had principles. He told her she didn't owe him anything. Her stunned look lingered even as she asked for his name again, as if committing it to memory. Zephyr drove off, late for work, and knowing the supervisor would yell again. Selene watched his car fade, something tugging at her chest. She wasn't used to people helping without wanting something in return. Not in her world. Not in the empire she controlled. For she wasn't just Selene Macro, she was the CEO and founder of Marotech Industries, one of the largest logistics and engineering companies in the region. Her name was on every magazine, but rarely her heart in any room. She had built her fortune alone, clawing through a cutthroat world where kindness often looked like weakness. But that morning, a single dad with frayed sleeves and weary eyes had shifted something inside her. Meanwhile, Zephyr's day spiraled as expected. His manager scolded him for being late, his co-workers whispered behind his back, and the shipment he'd been responsible for malfunctioned, making it seem like he was careless when in truth the equipment was outdated. By noon, Zephyr received his termination notice, polite words hiding the sting of replaceability. He drove home fighting the tightness in his throat, not wanting Mira to see. Their tiny rented room above a noisy mechanic shop felt smaller than ever. He reheated leftover lentils for her, smiling as she ate happily, unaware of the fear settling deeper in her father's bones. After she fell, asleep, Zephyr sat beside the window and stared at the streetlights flickering like dying stars. He wondered if life had decided he'd had enough chances. The next morning, a knock thundered through his door. Zephyr opened it cautiously, only to freeze at the sight before him. Selene stood there, polished, powerful, unshakable, yet her gaze held warmth. She apologized for coming unannounced and explained she had found him using license plate records through legal channels her company had access to. Zephyr felt embarrassed, vulnerable, exposed, but Selene didn't let him shrink away. She told him her company had been searching for someone with quick thinking, practical problem-solving skills and honesty, traits rarely found bundled together. She said she wanted to offer him a job, a proper one with training and stability, not the patchwork labor he'd been surviving on. Zephyr stepped back, heart racing, mind scrambling. Too good to be true, too sudden, too unreal. He hesitated, but Selene continued gently. She explained how the way he helped her had reminded her of who she used to be before the world taught her to harden. She believed people like him rarely got the opportunities they deserved, and she wanted to change that, starting with him. Zephyr accepted cautiously and soon found himself in a completely new environment, a bright distribution facility buzzing with energy, innovation, and respect. His trainers were patient. His salary was more than he'd ever dared hope for. The first time he held his official ID badge, he felt a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in years, a sense of belonging. But success wasn't instant. Zephyr struggled with the advanced technology at first. He made mistakes, asked repetitive questions, and often doubted whether he deserved to be there. Some co-workers whispered that he was a charity case. Others rolled their eyes at his slow pace. But Selene observed quietly from a distance, stepping in only when necessary, offering encouragement. Subtly, so he wouldn't feel obligated. Mira adjusted beautifully, tugging on her father's hand each day, excited to hear stories about his work. The little girl's joy gave Zephyr the strength to push through days when he wanted to quit. Slowly, steadily, he improved. His instincts and quick hands made him exceptional at field problem-solving, something Marotech valued highly. He climbed from trainee to junior technician within months, surprising even himself. Selene began visiting the facility more often, sometimes stopping to talk to Zephyr about equipment upgrades or staffing issues. Their conversations grew more personal as time passed. She admired his resilience, he admired her fairness. But Zephyr always maintained respectful distance. She was a billionaire CEO, and he was a single dad trying to rebuild his life. He didn't allow himself to imagine anything beyond gratitude. One evening, a storm ripped through the region, knocking out power in several distribution areas. Zephyr volunteered to help assess and stabilize the systems, working alongside Selene, who insisted on being present despite her status. They trudged through mud and rain, soaked and exhausted, but determined to restore operations. At one point, Mira's school called. She had gotten scared due to thunder, and Zephyr rushed to comfort her through the phone. Selene listened quietly to the gentle way he reassured his daughter, her heart softening further. When the crisis passed, Selene invited Zephyr and Mira to a small company appreciation dinner. It wasn't fancy, but it was heartfelt. Mira giggled the entire time, sitting near Selene, showing her drawings and stories. Selene found herself laughing more than she had in years. That evening, as Zephyr walked her to her car, he thanked her, not for the job, but for believing in him when he no longer believed in himself. Selene's breath caught at the sincerity in his voice. She told him he'd earned everything, that his kindness that day on the roadside had been the first glimpse of the leader she knew he could become. The moment lingered between them, tender and unspoken. As months passed, Zephyr saved enough to move Mira into a small but warm apartment with bright windows. His confidence grew, his smile returned, his future unfolded in ways he'd never dared imagine. Selene continued to be a steady presence, not overpowering, not demanding, just quietly supportive. Eventually, she asked him if he'd join a new leadership program she was developing, one aimed at uplifting overlooked, hard-working individuals. Zephyr accepted, realizing this wasn't charity. It was partnership, trust, respect, and perhaps someday something deeper. Their story, woven from a random act of kindness on a dusty morning, was now leading them both toward healing, purpose, and hope. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your engagement helps us create more stories that celebrate second chances and quiet acts of humanity. Special request: comment kindness always wins if you believe good people still make this world brighter. And so, in the daylight of an ordinary world, a single dad who had once stood on the edge of despair stepped into a new life, because kindness found him, recognized him, and lifted him higher than he ever thought he could reach.